It's Ashley from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and welcome back to my channel where I make a lot of cake and cookie decorating tutorials as well as give a lot of baking business tips. And if you guys saw my tutorial from yesterday where I did that palette knife cake, yeah, what I'm doing now is I'm transforming that cake into this new cake. So I added on another piece and I'm just kind of re-crumb coating everything, and I'm actually going to do a couple layers here just to really make sure that everything is nice and smooth. Today I am using American Buttercream, and you guys know if you've seen a lot of my tutorials on my channel, my number one pick is actually meringue-based buttercreams, especially Italian meringue buttercream. However, it's been really warm here lately, so I have been opting for American Buttercream. A lot of you guys live in hot and humid areas where it's really warm throughout the whole year, and one frequently asked question is what type of buttercream should you be using? I would personally opt for an American Buttercream with not just butter as the base, but I would add a little bit of shortening as well, just because it makes it a little bit more stable. Taste-wise, I do prefer all butter, but I do think that adding that shortening in is going to give you a little bit more stability and it won't melt on you. Now, since this is American Buttercream, I'm able to place that in the fridge for only about 15 minutes and it's fully crusted over and it's nice and solidified. If you ever have your fondant like that because maybe you left it out too long or it just didn't get covered right away, then definitely mix in some shortening until it gets back to its regular texture. And now I'm taking this mold, and I love this mold. It's super realistic, and I'm just going to press in my fondant. This is the best way to get the most out of your molds. I sometimes find that if I don't press it in and punch it in like that, it starts lifting out and then I never get a perfect press. So definitely do it that way, and never use an X-Acto knife or anything sharp to get rid of the excess. You'll notice I used kind of that flat tool to get rid of any of the excess. And then I put a little bit of shortening onto my cake, just a tiny amount so that everything sticks. A lot of people ask me, can't you just steam the cake? Can't you just kind of heat the buttercream or use more buttercream? I find that it makes things way too messy. Now I'm using this amazing Sequin Mold. It is a little bit pricey, especially for where I live, but I love it. It adds this really great texture to any cake, really, and they have so many different types of texturing mats. So I will link those down in the description box below so you can go and check them out. And what I love is that they have this sharp edge, so I don't even really need to cut off the excess. I can just kind of take my hand and smooth it against that edge and it will automatically come off. And then there you go. You have beautiful sequins. And I really was trying to model this after a lot of the backpacks that I see at the Disney parks coming out. There's tons in rose gold and lots of different colors that I absolutely love, and I'm doing this in black, so I'm making this a little bit more classic Minnie Mouse, I guess you would say. Now, it really is important that you place the zipper on first so that it looks like a real backpack. We want to cover up those seams on the outer edge and make sure that it's all kind of covered up with this sequin. And if you don't want to make this sequin, you can do this smooth just with regular fondant as well. Now, it will be trickier to get rid of those seams. You will just have to make sure that you really blend your edges together. What I love about this mold as well is that, as you can see, the way that it cuts it so it fits perfectly with the next paneling that you're going to do. Now, this works really well on this portion of the cake. It's a little bit trickier when I go to the front portions of the cake and the front and back of the backpack, just because then it's just like a straight line. But I find once we add the details on, it's not as noticeable. And I'm just continuing on here doing the exact same thing, and really important for this job, guys, that you have a sharp X-Acto knife. The sharper your X-Acto knife is, the way easier of a time you're going to have when you're doing fine detail work like this. Because what happens is, if it's not sharp enough, it ends up dragging your fondant off and you're going to be super frustrated. Also, don't be afraid to add on a little bit more of that shortening if need be so that it sticks. A lot of people are like, oh, shortening, I really don't like that flavor on my cakes. I completely understand where you're coming from. I've definitely never craved shortening in any form. However, I will say that I really don't notice the taste at all, especially when you have everything else on there. Now, for this particular cake, because of its size, I really don't need any inside supports, but I will say if you were to do this any taller or any higher, I definitely would recommend that you put dowels in there, as well as a much thicker cake board. The cake board not only serves a purpose of actually making sure that that cake is stabilized on top, but it also allows you to make sure that you can stick your dowels into something deeper. This is the first steam of many that I will do on this cake, and I'm just using a regular old clothing steamer, nothing fancy. This gets rid of the cornstarch. This also helps bind together all of those pieces. Now, I am going to place this in the fridge. I know some people are like, fondant in the fridge? I get it. Sometimes your fondant can get sweaty, but the reason that sometimes happens is if you use really cold cake, or if you don't have a low humidity fridge, which I do, so I never get sweaty fondant anymore. Now what I'm doing is, as you can see, I just kind of pressed in that sequin and I'm creating the ears of Mickey Mouse, or Minnie Mouse in this instance, I should say. So I'm just creating circles, and whenever I do Minnie or Mickey ears, I always cut out a small portion. And then what I did was I actually steamed those two pieces together and I placed the stick in the center. In order to place that little loop on the backpack, you can just try to freehand do it and not have any supports on there. It might stick up if it's something really small, but just to be sure, I want to give this a little bit more support. So I'm placing in these bubble tea straws, and I place them in fairly deep. You want them to go pretty much through the entire cake. And then I'm going to take some 18 gauge wire after I place this in, and I'm going to place that into the straws. What this does is it makes sure to keep that in place, because if I just try to put the wire in by itself, it's just going to break apart my cake and I'm going to start to get holes in there. So the straws really keep everything in place, and because we have that tension from the strength of that 18 gauge wire, it's pretty strong. And now what I'm doing is I'm going to cover that up so we don't see that wire, just a little piece of black fondant. And notice what I do here. I stick it on just haphazardly. It's not really super stuck on yet. Then I steam it, and then I put that other piece on and really mesh the two together. Now, whenever I'm working on things that are supposed to look like fabric, I really love using this stitching tool, which just kind of indents a little stitch pattern right wherever you want it. Now I'm going to take those dried ears, and no, I didn't have to dry these overnight or anything. The key to getting your fondant to stand up quickly and not have to wait so long for things to get dry is you actually want to make it a little bit thicker. And I know that sounds counterproductive because we know that the thinner the fondant is, the faster it'll dry. But if you make it just a little bit thicker, it can stand up on its own a lot more quickly. So now what I'm doing here is I'm going to create the straps of the backpack. Same thing, I'm using that little stitching tool, and then I'm going to place this on the back. Now what I did was I did steam the cake in between so that when I stick this on, everything sticks really, really easily. If you don't have a steamer, you can definitely do this with just a little bit of water and a paintbrush. But I always find that I don't get enough coverage with my paintbrush, and sometimes it's unpredictable about where I want to lie things down. So that's why I like to steam it. Now I'm creating the little front pocket, which is made with a little bit of modeling chocolate mixed with fondant. By the way, all of the products that I'm using today are from Satin. They are my favorite fondant and modeling chocolate brand. And this is not a sponsored video, but they did send me a lot of different products that I'm still using up, and this is part of that haul. So thank you very much, Satin. Now I did end up creating this bow a little bit differently than I normally would. I end up breaking this whole piece into two pieces just so that it goes onto the backpack a little bit more easily. When I had it all one piece, it made it really, really susceptible to falling off. So this way, when it's two separate pieces, there's less weight bearing down on the cake, so it's able to hold itself up just a little bit better. Now, if you did want a giant bow on this cake, there are some ways that you can do that. You can use some candy melts, which I find help things bind together a lot better, especially when it's a lot of weight on there. But in this instance, I just opted to keep it a little bit smaller, make things a bit easier on myself, and then cover up those messy bits in the middle with just some strips of that same pink fondant. Now I'm just making some little dots here using a piping tip, and I am going to be painting these gold, although it kind of looks cute with that yellow and pink, but you guys know me. I want these to be gold. Personally, I actually wanted these white, but I ran out of white fondant, so that is why I made it yellow underneath. Now, sometimes I do actually like to use yellow if I know I'm going to be painting it gold, because then that way, if I don't end up having really, really great coverage with my painting, it's a little less obvious. I am finding that I'm not getting the best coverage with my paint because I'm running low on the luster dust, and the ratio of vodka is a little bit too high in this mixture. So what I'll need to do is I'll need to let it dry for a bit and then go over it again just so I really make sure things are nice and gold. Now you can leave this out in room temperature. Now that everything is solidified and all of that fondant is really melted together well, you shouldn't have an issue if this is out in room temperature. But if it's really, really warm in your environment, I would place it in the fridge. And like I mentioned before, I don't have to worry too much about sweaty fondant, especially if that cake on the inside is not super, super cold. I also make sure not to store any other types of foods with my cakes because I do find that sometimes if I do that, smells or different things can affect the texture of that cake. Now let's get into the pricing. Now, I know it's kind of hard to tell size perception when you're looking at a video, but this is actually a really small cake. I would charge $215 Canadian for this cake. However, it would be a bigger cake. And if somebody insisted on making it this particular size, I would still charge that amount because it's really the same amount of work with just a small little difference in ingredient cost. And as always, guys, pricing differs all over the world. I just provide my pricing so you guys can really look at a series of my videos to see the differentiation between the types of cakes that I do. And we have a wonderful subscriber submission for the day. I'm absolutely in love with the color of this cake and the whole composition of it. So definitely go check out at mamaj_bakes on Instagram. I am so happy to be a part of a community that is just so supportive and a bunch of, wow, amazingly creative people. So if you want your submission to be featured on my channel, go and follow me at SD Bake Shop on Instagram and send me or tag me in a photo that you want featured on this channel so that we can share it and we can all support one another with your baking business or hobby. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading weekly, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys. Bye!